My name's Alex, and I'm an M&A consulting professional by trade in tech media and telecom, but I'm also a passionate member of the Women in Tech USA team, lifelong learner, and a huge proponent of choosing to challenge precedent and amplifying the stories of women in tech. Our organization has a double mission of one, choosing to close the gender gap, and two, helping women embrace technology and empowering 5 million women and girls across the globe by 2030, meeting in the process 5 UN Sustainable Development Goals. So as a part of this mission, today we're sitting down with two amazing women with very different backgrounds and perspectives and chatting about how they choose to challenge. Every woman's story is different, and every woman's story should be heard. Choosing to challenge for me means asking why. You know, why a boardroom demographic doesn't reflect my community, why women make up such a large portion of the undergraduate population but hold significantly fewer graduate degrees than men, and how do we challenge and change that which we are challenging? As you're asking yourself how you choose to challenge, we're encouraging you to use the chat and ask questions to both our panelists and to each other and build your network through conversation. With that, it's my pleasure to welcome our joiners and also introduce our panelists for today. Duncan is a Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer focused on state and local government at Dell Technologies. Prior to joining Dell, Ms. Duncan was the Chief Information Officer for the County of Santa Clara, located in the heart of Silicon Valley, and was appointed by the Obama administration as the Chief Information Officer of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Following the 2020 election, she served on the EPA agency review team for the Biden-Harris transition team as well. Ms. Duncan is also a published author, most recently of the book Industrial Digital Transformation, and sought-after speaker on the topics of technology modernization, digital transformation, and organizational development, and holds a Master of Science and Bachelor of Industrial Engineering, both from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Our second panelist, Lory Nunez, is a senior data scientist for wealth management technology responsible for leading global AI initiatives at JP Morgan. As a former law intern, software engineer, business intelligence analyst, research scientist, and as engineer one of a startup, she brings a really unique perspective on data projects. This diversity of experience has driven her to make data science accessible for everybody. She holds multiple patents in AI applications and is a published technical author and an international speaker for natural language processing and machine learning. Lory was named the 2021 Data Science Professional of the Year at the Water Technology Women in Data and Technology Awards. Lory holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of San Carlos in the Philippines. Additionally, note that our event is moderated by Lory Rodriguez, our Chief Digital Officer for Women in Tech and author of the upcoming book, We Want You to Stay, The Hidden Lives of 20 Women in STEM. Lory, take it away.
Thank you, Alexandra. And welcome everyone, and a big thank you to Anne and Lory for joining our ongoing conversation about women in technology. Our first question is the Oranges story. Give us some highlights of your background, in addition to what Alex just said, and who you are, what you do, how you got to where you are, some more color commentary to just facts, and why are you so passionate about technology? Anne, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, well, that's a few questions all rolled into one, Lory. So when I forget to answer half of it, you can remind me. And apologies for, I was saying as we were getting started that the cats, were nowhere to be found. So of course, as soon as the event kicked off, cats everywhere. So apologies for that. So my background, as we mentioned in the bio, so I went to Georgia Tech. I studied engineering. Nothing to do with what I do today, really, although being an industrial engineer does tie well with IT in the sense that there's a big focus on two things that are relevant. One is process and process engineering and process improvement, which is important in technology. And the other is it's much sort of more people oriented than most of the other engineering professions. So it's more tied to and focused on the management roles I've had over the years and helpful for leadership. And, there's some interesting data, and I don't remember the specific numbers, but an incredibly large number of Georgia Tech's industrial engineering graduates are C-level executives in their corporations, or founders of companies or other things. It's just an outstanding number that makes me feel like a complete underachiever whenever I go back to the IE department. So, in terms of I did industrial engineering in varying forms of engineering for maybe the first decade of my career, and then I sort of got slowly but surely sucked into things that looked like IT, to the point where and part of that was because I was in manufacturing, and I kept working on things that would then would get moved to HP's factories in Asia, and I decided that I didn't really want to spend the rest of my career flying back and forth to Asia. As much as I enjoyed going to Singapore, I didn't really want to do it 14 times a year. So I moved into other areas and ultimately got reorganized at IT, and that's how I wound up in IT. Was I got reorganized in there. And after I left HP was when I made the move to the private sector, and that was because I was interested in doing something different. I was a little tired of trying to basically sell people printers and ink, which is essentially what we've been doing. And also I needed a job because I didn't have one, so that was another good reason to go do that job. So I worked in the school district, and then the serendipity in my life was someone that I'd met at HP, and it's a bit of a long story, so I'll tell the very short version of it. But someone I had met at HP, I ran into at a conference, and they said that they were working on the presidential appointments project, and I should give them my resume. And 2 years later, I got a call from the Office of Presidential Personnel. And I thought it was a joke, honestly, until they said the name of the person who had sent my resume over there. And then I'm like, oh, this is actually a real phone call. This is not a joke. So, that's sort of some of the background that's not in my resume is, it was getting into government, was and then ending up in the administration was a little bit of having some of the right skills and a lot of being in the right place at the right time. So Lory, as I said, what was the rest of the question? You're on mute, Lory.
Lory, another Zoom problem.
Yeah, we need a sign.
I love, so you were out of a job. So you have this career transition where you had to reinvent yourself. I'd love to dig into that actually a little bit more.
Okay. So I was at HP, and HP had been an amazing place to work. HP then became a less amazing place to work, and we ran through this time period of rolling layoffs. And every Monday the question was who was getting laid off, which is a really lousy way to run a company, right? Because everybody's went from a company where people never got laid off involuntarily to a company where on Monday you wondered who was still there and whether it might be you that went next. So I got called on my birthday while I was on vacation. That was a real highlight, and it wasn't a big surprise, however, and I got laid off. And this was it was August of 2008, and the termination was October, so there was a 2-month window. So I actually found a job, and then the bottom dropped out of the economy, and it was actually in the office product sector, and that's like a early warning place, and so that they were the first ones to rescind an offer. So it took me a year almost to find a job. I didn't have a job interview for 10 months, I think. I mean, there was just nothing going on. And particularly at the level I was at, it was not an easy, it was particularly hard. So it was an opportunity to think about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to change. And I did some coaching, and really spent some time trying to think about what I wanted to do. And my conclusion was that I wanted to use my expertise to do more than help a company make money. Because I think HP had at that point, I think it's changed again, but at that point they sort of lost their way in that corporate citizenship world. and weren't very focused on, HP always was a do well by doing good company, and that had sort of been lost in the shuffle. And I think there again, but anyway, and I wanted to do good. So that was a lot of the decision. So I applied online, and that's one of the things I will share in government that you can do that you can't do in most other places. You can apply for a job online and through a paper process, screening process, get a job, right? That doesn't happen a lot in the private sector. But I applied online, and they winnowed down the candidates, and they brought me in. And right before I walked into the room, they said, by the way, there are 14 people in that room, because that's how I like to do big panel interviews in the public sector. And I went through a couple rounds of interviews and had to make the adjustment to the public sector, which was huge. I mean, the first thing I had to learn was how not to break the law, which I nearly did a couple times. I nearly broke the law of the Brown Act, which is about public meetings. And because I called the school board and said, let's have a conversation. And thankfully someone said, no, we can't do that. And then I nearly broke the procurement rules because I didn't know that I had to go through a couple different processes to buy things that I did in the private sector. So thankfully, the federal government keeps better tabs on people than a small school district. But I didn't break the law. So at least, someone grabbed me by the neck and pulled me back both times. But yeah, it was a huge change, and I'm very glad that I did it.
Yeah, I mean, that's encouraging, because everybody, when you just look through the bullets, right, like Alex listed off, you just think, wow, there's this linear progression, and what a great career trajectory, right? There's no valleys in there at all. And yet you had a big one, and it gave you time to reflect, and at a very difficult time, the financial crisis. So you were really slammed and had to think a lot about what that next move would be, and you pivoted your career. I think that is, I think that's so important to highlight, because we all look at people like yourself and think, wow, what a beautiful linear career path, no downs in there at all. And that's not the case. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, everybody has ups and downs. It's good to know.
Lory, how about you? So your origin story, essentially, give us a little color commentary besides the bullet outline, and maybe weave in there, your passion for, how'd you get into artificial intelligence and your passion for technology?
Sure. So my undergraduate degree is in mathematics. And the reason why I chose mathematics as my undergraduate degree was because the line was shortest for enrollment in BS mathematics. You have my choices were either political science, because I was raised in a family of lawyers, or computer science, because I want to be practical about my future. And then computer science and mathematics were in the same department. And they said that, oh, you can enroll in mathematics, no problem. And then after 1 or 2 semesters, if it's not good enough, if you want to shift, you can always shift to computer science. I say, and how long is this process? Oh, 5 minutes, you're done. I said, okay, let me become a mathematics. Let me enroll in mathematics, and I'll just shift. I never shifted. And so my thesis at that time in my 4th year in my undergrad degree was, it wasn't because I was interested in AI per se. I wanted to solve a problem. My problem was I wanted to get the best course load in a semester. I want to get the optimal combination of courses in a semester. That was my problem. I did not think of, oh, I'm going to use AI. I'm going to use combinatorial optimization. I just wanted to solve that problem. So at that time, there wasn't any Google. So I was just searching on how other people solve that problem, reading papers, and I touched into AI. That's why my thesis was in AI. Then when I graduated, I was given 2 options. One job was to become a wealth advisor for a big bank in the Philippines, and the other one was to become an engineer. I chose to become an engineer because of, again, practicality. It paid a little bit better, and I didn't know what a wealth advisor was. I've never advised anybody on wealth in my entire life. So I said, okay, safer choice, practical choice. I became an engineer. 2 years in, I was like, I know the waterfall method. I know C, I know C++. I said, something's missing. There's this little voice in my head, like, where do I go from here in my career? I looked around, like, what next? So I said, you know what? Let me go back to law school. because my parents were giving me some suggestions that maybe I should become a lawyer, think about becoming a lawyer. And that was the natural hope that I, follow their footsteps. So I went to law school. I quit my engineering job. I went out of tech, went to law school with the full intention of becoming a lawyer. I was a pretty decent law student, but then practicality kicked in again. I said, dude, I need money. This wasn't cheap. So at that time, again, it was serendipity that there was this, unbeknownst to me at that time, an AI expert from Silicon Valley, from Xerox Spark, way before, right? Who wanted to start his fintech startup in the Philippines because he had family there and he needed a research assistant. So I applied, I got the job, partly because of the thesis I did back in undergrad, and I helped him out. And that was when my education on AI started. This was before data science was even coined. And I didn't know I was doing AI at that time, really. I was just helping him do his papers, making his experimental test sets and all that. And after that, 2008 came, the financial crisis came. I lost my job, right? And so then at that time, I had the option to go back to law school. You can always go back to law school and get out of tech. But at that time, I was hooked. I liked what I was doing and I wanted to do more. But the jobs in the financial sector at that time, as you could imagine, they were very hard to find. Mm-hmm. So I worked in startups. That's where I got my startup experience, and I enjoyed working in startups. And that thing led to another. I worked in a couple of startups, leveraging what I learned from my previous experience, natural language processing and machine learning, until I'm in my position now. So that's the short story.
It's interesting you share losing your job in a very tough financial crisis market in 2008. And then also the networking connections that there's the chance to apply online, but that really the serendipity piece was being open to networking and then certainly probably providing value to someone without any expectation of return at some point. And then that return came to you much later and in an unexpected way, with a job offer or a connection to someone else that led to some work. Am I understanding that process a little bit?
Yes. So when I get jobs at startups, sometimes it's through networking because you know somebody that you worked with before and you like working with that person, and somebody would just recommend, hey, I worked with Lory before, and so on and so forth. And so that's why being active in the community, I think, really helps. Helping a project just for the sake of helping and just for the sake of curiosity and being there, I think also helps a lot. And not just superficial networking, because everybody has LinkedIn now. Everybody can just drop in and say hi, hello, but actually being interested in the project and helping out in however way you can, benefits you, whether or not it's a job connection, but you'll learn something new every time.
So how do you make that? You talked about LinkedIn, right? So you can hit connect and maybe say, hey, I'd love to add you to my network. But it sounds like you did something slightly different. So what is your message to somebody when you're connecting on a LinkedIn that says, I'm really interested in this project and I want to help, or describe how you make that deeper connection? Because I think for some people that may not be, they don't really know how to make that kind of deeper connection.
Right. So for me, it wasn't LinkedIn. It was more on, I went to in the US when I was between jobs, I took a break from my job because at that time when I was working for that company, I liked what I was doing. I was doing natural language processing, but I felt that the technology they used wasn't really state of the art, and I wanted to know more and learn more. So I stopped work for 2 months to go into this fellowship, this data engineering fellowship in New York City called Insight Data Science. And then there I was able to network with a lot of people. And there I was able to go to many different events. Now, going back to your question, how do you network? You ask them what they're doing right now. Like what project are you working on right now? And you listen to what project that they're working on right now. And you find commonalities on, let's say that, hey, I'm trying to read this text. I'm trying to read sentiment from Twitter text. I'm just giving a very simple example. And then he said, oh, you know what? I know this guy who has some code written, or I know this girl who has some code written on that. So you try to exchange tips on how you think you could help in their project. It starts by asking, what are you working on right now, right? So that's always my first question when I meet a person in a networking event. What are you working on right now?
Yeah, what are you working on? And then you gave something. You gave a tip, some connection,
Yeah.
some other piece. It wasn't like, what are you working on? Hey, hire me, right? There's this
Yeah.
there's this kind of reciprocity piece that comes in. That's very helpful, I think. You know, how you frame you listen and you show real interest, and then other people will show interest in you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate the origin stories with a little more color. The next question here is really around our theme, choose to challenge. And Lory, we'll start with you on this one, then Anne will go to you. So what is your choose to challenge topic? And then what does that mean to you and why?
Right. So my choose to challenge topic is this phrase called feminine leadership. I've heard this phrase. I've seen this phrase in articles online, so on and so forth. And I choose to challenge that, like the concept of feminine leadership, because to me, and what they say, it means empathy, humility, and relationship dynamics. And that's all great. Leaders should have that, full stop, period, right? Leaders should be empathetic, leaders should be humble, leaders should care about the people they work with. But my concern about the term feminine leadership is it might promote unconscious bias, and that it seems that we're limiting ourselves on how we see women leaders and how we are as women leaders, right? Because I feel, to me, that leadership, taking two steps back, leadership is really the product of our experience. If we're truly to become authentic leaders, we have to draw into our well of experience. And some of our experience for some might not be as nurturing as others. For some, it might be more driven. It might be more ambitious. And I just feel that we should also celebrate that. We should celebrate the experiences that we have as women, of our drive and our ambition to be where we're at now. I worked at a startup. We have to go at a really fast pace at a startup. I'm an immigrant. As an immigrant, you survive. That's your mindset. You come to a new country, you survive, you thrive. There's ambition there. You take risks. That's the mindset. And to me, that's leadership qualities, of course, right? I think
Hello, what can we get started for you today? Hi, can I get a large?
Right. So to me, those are leadership qualities, and in this day and age, I think that we're not defined by these types of qualities. I think it's more, how do we adapt our leadership styles in different situations? So that's why I choose to challenge the label, right? It should be a label across all genders, and it should not define who we are as a woman and who we see as successful women leaders.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anne, what is your how did you choose to challenge, and how did that apply to your own career trajectory?
Yeah, so I was trying to think of what I wanted to talk about, and what I really occurred to me is something, a conversation I've had with a number of people over the years. And in fact, I'm having this amazing experience right now. I'm mentoring a group of Georgia Tech students, ISYE students, 3 of them, and we meet once a month, and they have great questions. I mean, way better than the questions I would have had when I was a college junior or senior. They're just amazing. So I've had a lot of things to think about sort of what you tell people. But what I really talk about is career management, specifically from the perspective of taking risks and trying new things. And when people ask me, so what's the one thing you tell people? I say, don't get too comfortable. Because I find that people, and I think women do this more than men, right? They get comfortable someplace doing something in their career, and they don't change, right? They don't move on to do the next thing and take the next, particularly if if you work someplace like HP was, where no one is going to look at you and say, we're promoting you. It's always, you have to go find the next job. And so when I look back, my career, I got too comfortable at HP, which is not to say that my jobs were always comfortable, but that I probably should have left. I worked at HP for 20 years, which I sort of hate to admit at this point, because you start adding on whatever else I've done and I go, wow, when did I get that old? But I probably stayed there 8 years too long. Now, I can throw on sort of later in that time a little bit of stuff with my family where I, went through that point in my life where my parents became ill and things like that. But the fact of the matter is that before that happened, I probably should have already been gone from HP. I was too comfortable living in Vancouver, working for basically the only major employer in Vancouver, and doing what I was doing, and I'd really stopped advancing my career. So I really encourage people to really examine, where they are and whether they're really, I'm not saying I wasn't learning things in my jobs, but I was not growing the way that I could have, or the way that I am now when I do something new. So really examine your career and examine where you are in your job right now, and look at that and say, really, should I stay where I am in this job or at this company or in this city or whatever? Or is it time to try something new? And I'll give you the corollary to that, right? When I went to work for President Obama, right, I was, by the time they offered me a job, it was the fall of 2013. By the time I actually got in the door, it was August of 2014. I took a job knowing that in January of 2017, I would be unemployed, right? And that is a leap of faith that is the absolute opposite of being too comfortable. Right? So I would highly recommend people take their chances and do things like that, knowing that there's a risk down at the end of the road.
I love that. And you both mentioned taking risks and not being comfortable with the label or your job that you're in. And when your parents became ill, you were at HP, but would you have taken a risk during that time? Because there are people, life starts to get complicated after 10, 20 years into your career. Yeah. You've got parents that become ill. You might be partnered up with somebody, and now you have this complicated family dynamic that goes on. Children might appear. You might take a hobby that you're really interested in. Life just starts to be more than just your career. You get out of college, you're like, I'm all in. Now there are the other things pulling at you. And there's financial implications to taking a risk. Hey, Kat, yay. So how do you set yourself up to take a risk when the financial piece just might be a little scary?
Yeah. And that is, I will give you so I would say I probably should have left HP around 2001 or 2002. It was 2004 that my father died. So, I think I should have left before that happened. But yes, it does get complicated. My father got sick. I don't actually know when he got sick because he didn't tell anybody for a while, but that's another story. But he got sick. He died in July of 2004. My parents were raising two of my nephews at that point. And my mother proved to be incapable of dealing with it. So within a year, I had my mother and the younger of the boys. The older one had then gone off to college, but my mother and the younger boy were now with me in Vancouver, moved from Atlanta. So would I have recommended changing my job at that point? Probably not. When I suddenly had a teenager that I was responsible for and trying to deal with my mother. But I do think that, from a financial standpoint, I could certainly have thought about changing jobs without moving. It probably would have been impossible to move at that point. But I think from a financial standpoint, this is another conversation I have with these students at Georgia Tech is, I was not leaving HP in the midst of the financial crisis like I did, was the worst possible time because, my stock options were underwater. My 401k was pitiful. The amount of money that walked out the door with me at HP was really sad. And thankfully there was enough money to pay the bills for that next year. And in fact, when I was getting my security clearance, they asked me to have, to give us the name of someone who can corroborate that you were unemployed. So I said, well, ask my nephew. And he said, they called back and they said, he doesn't remember you being unemployed. So clearly his life was not hard while I was unemployed. But, you know, to get the point is making sure I had made sure I had saved money. I did have enough money in my bank account to pay the bills for that year. And, you know, this conversation I had with these students at Georgia Tech when they asked me about money was, you know, live below your means so that you put yourself in a situation where you can make those choices or you can survive when you don't make the choice, right? Not everyone can do that, right? Most of us on this call probably are lucky enough that we can make that choice. Many people can't afford to, and I want to recognize that, particularly even engineers and technologists who are just at a college, right? And you've got loans and you've got, you live like someplace expensive and you don't make that much money. But as you make more money, paying yourself first, saving money so that you can make those choices makes a huge difference going forward, that you're able to weather those choices or weather the involuntary moments that happen. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I exactly answered your question. I may have gone off on a little tangent, but
no, it is beautiful as always. It's better when we go down some side streets, because if we anticipated the answers, then the questions don't matter as much, I think. I think there's that financial piece and being prepared for that. And I love it's both, right? So that you have the flexibility to leave when you feel you need to, but also you're prepared should that choice be made for you. I think too, and Lory, if you could answer this follow-on question based on where we're going with this conversation, you probably have to be intentional about your skill set in that notion of not getting comfortable, you know, that you're prepared to always be prepared for that next role, either in your company or somewhere else. Is that something that you think is another aspect of preparation so that you can take risks or be prepared should a risk happen to you, whether you liked it or not?
Yes, short answer. But to elaborate, one thing that happened when I was, when I started working in the United States, I worked for a mid-sized company. And then this was the time when I took a work break, right? 2 months of no salary to go into this fellowship program. And that's a huge risk for me because number one, I don't have family here in the US. I don't have any fallback. Number two, I have a son, right? I have a son who I have to pay for his education and make sure that I don't get unemployed for a long time, or else it's not just me, it's two people. So that was a risk that I really had to think about. Like, is this worth the risk? Of course. So when you're in that situation, number one, you explore your options, you make an honest assessment of, okay, if I'm going to take this fellowship, what are my chances of getting a job, right? If the chances are pretty high, then yes, it's a risk I'm willing to take. If the chances are pretty low, then you know what? Probably not. So I got creative. I had to make an honest, brutal self-assessment. I have to make sure that this is the best option for me. And I ask for help, right? I ask for help. For many of us, sometimes asking for help is hard because we're used to not ask for help. But I ask for help just so that I can give myself some buffer. But then at that point, going back to your question, which to Anne's point, I forgot at this point in time right now, it's in every step of my career, I always make an honest assessment of what I can do and what I have learned, right? And what I think the industry is going towards and how I can take those skills that I have, and either it's a one-to-one mapping of these new skills or it's a transferable skill. So I always try to make that assessment every 2 to 4 years. No, every 2 years, I said, okay, where do I think the industry is going? What have I learned in this 2 years that I have in this company? And I take the risk. And that's what sometimes you have to pat ourselves in the back as well. We have all these issues like, oh my God, I'm not this. But one of the things I pat myself on the back is that I make these honest self-assessments, and I'm willing to take the risk. I moved to New York with nothing but a small bag. Right. So that's something that I'm kind of proud of. And that's something I try to bring to my career. That's why when I said before that we're the product of our experiences, right? When we look back in our lives, what have we experienced? We bring those lessons in our career, because I think that's what helped me. I'm the product of my experience as an immigrant, as a mother, and I bring that in my career decision skills.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for bringing in your whole experience as well. This notion that we have to compartmentalize work, I get that to some degree, but we are never not who we are. We bring all of that to the work. We've got parents who are dying, or children that have issues, or the great stuff that we're doing, that exists within us 24/7. And when we kind of shove that aside, and we have to do that to some degree, but we also have to understand that that is who we are. And to your earlier point of bringing those experiences into your leadership style and empathy, and understanding that it's not just you going through these things, there are other people out there that we may not know what they're going through when they're having a bad day, or some really critical thing that they're trying to hold inside is impacting their work. And so being open to that, I think, is really important, and being honest in conversations like this, I think, helps other people work through some of those issues as well. So now I get into kind of the deeper dive into some advice. And when you're thinking about what a woman or man listening to this conversation and what they could take away and do some tangible thing, and I think you touched on some already, what could they do today or tomorrow or over this weekend when they find an hour, something that they can apply from your experience and reflections that could change their trajectory, even just that slight bit that sends them off into a better path?
Yeah, so I think, and it's very similar, I think, to what Lori just said, and what I talked about earlier. It's that taking some time to reflect on where you are in your career and your particular job. Is the job I'm in right now, and the company I'm working for, or the agency, or whatever it may be, is it still serving my career, my personal development, my growth? And that can be in a lot of ways. Is it still serving me financially? Is it still serving my career trajectory? Is it still serving my being excited and learning something? I mean, I've had a couple of points in my career where I've changed jobs from a perfectly good job, whether it's in the same company or to a different place, because I was bored, right? The job was just not interesting. There's nothing wrong with it. It wasn't bad for my career. It paid just fine, but I was bored out of my mind, right? And who wants to be bored at work, right? We thankfully are the kind of jobs we don't have to be bored. But there are other times where maybe you're not learning things, maybe you're not growing, maybe they're not paying you enough money, or it's become a toxic work environment. You know, take some time and reflect on those things, and if it's not moving you forward where you want to go, then take that time and make a plan to find the next thing, whether it's again at that same organization or a different one. Um, to me, that I will certainly say I didn't do that enough. I think I drank, well, I shouldn't say I drank the Kool-Aid, because it was real. When I started HP, people went to work for HP. They spent their career at HP. They retired from HP. That was what people did. But the company broke the social contract, and it took the employees a while to sort of clue in that the social contract had been broken, and to start thinking about work differently, and thinking about the idea that you actually can leave here and go somewhere else. And so because of that, in the earlier part of my career, I don't think I did a good job of that. So I'd encourage people to take the time and do that, and assess where they are and make a plan. You don't have to have a plan for the rest of your career, but what's next right now.
Draw me a picture. Is this like a Excel spreadsheet, and you put down your values on one side and you stack, you put some ranking weightings on the other? Or is this literally sitting on a beach with a cocktail thinking about it? Like, where is, what does assessment mean? It can mean a lot of things in people's heads.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's true. It can mean a lot of things. I've never been, interestingly enough, given how much I write things down and make lists, I've never been a big make a list of pros and cons and make a decision. I think that usually it's been fairly obvious to me. But for me, one of the big tests is I much prefer the idea of sit down on the beach with a drink. But that sense of, once you've made your decision, does it feel right? I think that's a really important way to look at problems. Is think about what I want to do and then go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And if you feel great, probably the right decision. If your gut, falls and you feel awful about it, then you need to rethink it. I mean, one time I got a job offer and I got off the phone and I felt I wasn't excited. I was like I felt like something bad had happened. I took a minute and went, maybe that's not the right job. If I didn't get off the phone feeling excited about it, maybe I need to rethink this idea that that's someplace I want to go work and that's the change I want to make. So, to me, it as much of an engineer as I am in so many ways, this kind of stuff ends up being more about my gut. But I think it's perfectly reasonable if people want to make a list. I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to approach it.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I mean, I think that's a great perspective. There's a lot of things that we know subconsciously, and your gut is the way of tapping into that without you, having to make a list. And for people who are more comfortable with a list and a matrix and a weighted grid and some AI, and maybe that's the way to do it for others. But it's nice to know that there is a perspective that if you get off the phone and you're not excited, that's probably not the place where you want to go. It could be as simple as that. So Lory, for you, what advice would you give to let's say in your situation? There's probably women out there who are struggling either as a single mom or maybe they're have a partner, and they're torn between this, I need to advance my career and some risks that I need to take there, and this little person or people at home that I need to care for. What advice would you give to them on how to make that decision, make that change?
Well, first, do not be guilty about thinking about that and thinking of making the change. Because I've listened to many moms saying, oh, but I feel guilty because, my kids and my family, they're my priority. Do not feel guilty, right? Because start by not feeling guilty about thinking about that. Because you're a good mom, you're a good partner if you're happy with yourself, if you feel that you're fulfilled. You're a better partner, you're a better mother if you feel that. So that's point number one. Do not feel guilty, because I've heard so many people start off by saying that I feel guilty about thinking about that. Now, the second thing is, again, make an honest assessment again of what your skills are, because many of the skills that we have are transferable. And one of the things I like about technology as a field, it's always evolving. There's no hard and fast roles that you have. There's no you have to be X, Y, Z. Like if you go to work for a law firm, you start as an associate, then a senior associate, so on and so forth. In technology, you can make your own role, right? You can build your own product. You can build your own company. The barrier to entry in any technology related field is low compared to others. So my first advice is do not feel guilty. My second advice is have an honest assessment of your skill set. That's what you're currently working on. And then look at where in the industry you're most interested in. It can be two ways. It can either be a technology technique. Maybe you're interested about AI, machine learning, data engineering, or you could be interested about a problem. It could be healthcare. It could be art. It could be something else. Find which one you're passionate about, and then be creative on trying to gain knowledge and experience in those areas. Knowledge and experience doesn't necessarily mean money. Theoretically, in an ideal sense, I could enroll in a school, right? I could go to a boot camp. Boot camps are also there. You have boot camps, but it costs what? $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 for a boot camp. But there are options there. So if you have the means, if you have childcare that's available to you, you could probably go full time. That's the best way. I would think that's the easiest way in terms of the guidance. You can go to a boot camp where they have some part-time options, or if those options are not available to you, what you could do is find yourself some mentors, right, in the industry where you want to break in, and ask for advice. They say, you know what, I'm really interested in this project that you're doing. Can I, especially for startups, I think startups are great learning tools for aspiring engineers or data scientists who need experience, because the barrier to entry for a startup is low, and they always want people to help them out. So start by having a skills assessment, and then know what industry you're interested in, build the foundation for learning. Ideally, you would have a school or a boot camp, or there you have open Coursera, you have Udemy, you have all these other learning platforms that you could do for free. But those platforms, though, they're free, but accomplishing or finishing one also means that you need to really focus and be committed on finishing a module, right? So that means discipline, right? So discipline could mean, but some people could say, oh my God, I just can't finish it all by myself. Find a community, find a partner. Like, you find a running partner, you find a gym partner, find a Coursera partner. Then you go there. And then once you build a foundation, find a place where you can apply what you've learned. If you can't find a place where you can apply what you learn, even for free or for a startup, make your own Bitbucket repository. Code. Find a problem you want to solve it, put it out there, right? And so you can be creative on how you want to approach this. Just my suggestion again, be creative about your problem solving. And if you could, find a mentor who can help you and guide you.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's interesting. We have a question from the audience that kind of fits to what you were just talking about, but there's a little bit of a different take. So it's kind of a two-part question. What advice would you have? So this is from Tally. What advice would you have for someone who is new to tech and innovation space? Previously, they're from finance and later fintech. So I feel I'm reading into this, and perhaps it's wrong. There's a little bit of confidence level here. I love innovation and design thinking, but find it intimidating to speak up as much as I'd like, given my lack of experience in comparison to my other white male colleagues. Does this just come with time, continued education? And I think maybe there's some other underlying questions there as well. So what advice would you give to Tally in terms of speaking up more and moving more confidently into the tech and innovation space? Anne, do you want to take that one? And then Lory, if you could answer as well.
You faked me out because I thought you were going to ask Lory that.
Sorry, I started with Lory and then threw your name in at the end.
That's okay.
So essentially, it's like, how do you build the confidence to speak up when you're moving into a new space?
All right. I was listening. You still faked me out. But so I think that, that is building confidence is a challenge. And I think one of the ways to build confidence is to start by recognizing that, and someone, this came up a little bit earlier, is that, everybody or almost everybody is just as nervous as you are 90% of the time, right? Everybody thinks that they're an imposter. Everybody thinks that everybody out there is better. Now, I shouldn't say everybody, because the people who don't think that, and they're usually the ones who are not the best, right? But they are so sure of themselves, and in fact, I will butcher this comment, but there's a quote somewhere that basically says, that the more we know, the less certain we are that we know anything, right? So we start very certain that we know things, and then as we learn, we discover we know less and less, and the world expands in front of us. So the people who are really sure probably don't know a whole lot. The people who express a little doubt now and then, and who ask questions in addition to making statements, they're just like you. They're just as worried that they don't know as you are. So I always think, it's sort of like telling someone, the thing where they tell people to envision their audience naked, right? Remind yourself that everybody else is struggling to be as good as they can and to know as much. And that no one is going to think that you are less capable or smart if you say something. If you have something thoughtful to say and you speak up, more than likely people are gonna work on, use that information and move the conversation forward and appreciate your input. And if they don't, then you're in the wrong room, because you're working with people who are not the kind of people you want to work with. But I think that you only truly build that confidence by doing it. So I can give you all the advice in the world about it's safe. Go ahead and try it. But but ultimately the confidence is built by stepping up and speaking up and seeing that everything was okay when you did. And like I said, if you end up in a room where people don't appreciate it, then go find another room, because, you know, everybody here is smart and capable and has something to contribute, and you should be in a room with people who appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm going to emphasize that last bit as well, right? Because if you take the risk to speak up and you're not appreciated for that, and you're made to feel small, then it's probably not you. It is the people in the room, right? Or it could just be it's just not a right mix. But you should never leave a conversation feeling less than when you entered that conversation. And if you get that too often in the place you work, then it's time to put into some of the practices we heard earlier, and maybe make a plan on how you escape from that room. So fantastic points. Lory, anything to add on that question?
To me, confidence is just not being afraid to fail, or just sort of not caring what they think. Like, if I ask the most stupidest question, I don't care. I've heard people say, "Oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about." So what? I'm just gonna keep on asking until I get my answer, or until I fix this problem for you, or until I build a solution for you. So I think you get confidence when in that inner voice in your mind. So what if they say, you know, she doesn't know what she's talking about? So what? I have a goal, right? Let's say that I'm in this room. I have this goal to know something, to build something, to solve something. I'm just gonna ask questions. I don't care if you find my questions, whether they're relevant or not. I'm just gonna go and ask that. So that's one thing. And to both Lory and Anne's point, if you feel that less of what you were before you asked that question, either you're not in the right room, or you know what, you don't need that, right? What does that add to your goal, or what does that add to what you're trying to accomplish? So my thought is just to be confident. Just don't be afraid to fail, or don't even think of what other people might think of you. To me, that's confidence.
And I think as well, what something sparked a concept in my head. Sometimes we translate what somebody said negatively, and that's not what they meant. So I think that's a second half of don't worry what they think, because sometimes when we worry what they think, we're actually thinking things that was not in their head. It wasn't their intent. They could just be questioning or pushing you to think a little differently, or they're just trying to understand themselves. And so when you just take that off the table and you don't care what they think, and you're focused on the goal, you don't bring some of these other negative habits that you might have in that inner voice in your head, that imposter syndrome, or turning things that aren't negative into negative. You just completely take that off the table. So that's a fantastic point. Just a really quick tactical question on the data science path and the engineer path, because it's so critically important for AI. There's this notion for non-tech people to think that anything that's artificial intelligence is by design objective. It's neutral. It's a computer, where anyone in the industry understands that people program the intelligence into the system. And so we need lots of different perspectives coming into AI specifically. And I know you've already talked about this, Lory, but if you could just sum up like the 1 to 3 things that would encourage somebody to think about going into data science. What are your thoughts on that? Or what's the first thing that they should do? Or what are the top 2 or 3 things they should do to move into that field?
So data science for me, or artificial intelligence, it's a push and pull of 2 things. Number 1, data, because it's a function of data. Data science is a function of data. Machines learn from data. Data/domain expertise, that's one bucket. The other bucket is the actual modeling, the actual mathematics on how you're making the machines learn. 2 things, right? So first you have to assess where are my strengths? Am I really good at mathematical modeling? Am I really good at, programming, making sure all these algorithms run in a scalable fashion? Or I'm non-technical, I'm really, really good at, healthcare. or I'm really, really good at some other non-technical domain. I have domain expertise. Remember, artificial intelligence learns from data and learns from experts. So even if you think, oh my God, I don't have any technical knowledge, I can't program something, but you have that data, you have that domain expertise. So that's transferable. So you think, okay, where am I in the spectrum, right? Honest self-assessment. What can I offer? And number two, what do I need to augment this? So you have to, I think, learn basics of data science. So the depth of the basics that you need to learn depend on what career path you want to go. So three things. You can either go research oriented based. So meaning research, you make papers, you make papers and stuff. You could do applied machine learning where you have product development, where you develop AI products, or you could be more in the business strategy, right? Where you help business on how to optimize the bottom line by using AI. Think of where you fit in those buckets. Think of what training you need to augment your current skill set to fit in those buckets, and then get that training. There's a lot, again, in online platforms. And once you build that foundation, find a project that you can work on, right? Find an open source project you can latch on, find a startup you can help out, or make your own. Because when you do these online courses, they have projects, capstone projects at the end. Make sure you fully immerse yourself on that. And now you have a nice portfolio, right? So that's my advice. I'm sure there are more out there, but I just in my experience, that's a practical way of moving forward.
Great, thank you. I'm a big fan of pushing a lot of women wherever they are in that domain expertise. I have no technical piece to come in and see where you can fit in the whole AI space. Anne, any closing thoughts?
You know, I just think it's just great to have this conversation and to get people thinking more about, you know, actively developing and managing their careers and making great choices about what they're going to do. And also want to add that I encourage every one of you to take these lessons and share them with other folks who maybe aren't as far along in their careers that you can help out, that you can mentor. I mean, this experience I've been having this year of mentoring these students has been great, but you don't have to have a formal mentoring program to give someone else a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. We all help each other and lift each other up. And that's really the foundation of Women in Tech, the organization, and why I'm so excited to be a part of it. Not just the US chapter, but globally, looking at girls and boys that don't even have access to clean water, right? They can't even get into tech. Their perspectives are completely out there, and the digital divide just keeps growing as we leave entire countries behind or portions of countries behind. And so I love the fact that this organization can have a conversation with women who are trying to advance in their career and first world problems, and at the same time be helping the other end of the spectrum where clean water, I can't even go to school because I spend most of my day gathering water, and being able to bring all of that together. It's a big open tent here, and the more that we can come in and help each other and have that sort of servant leadership attitude, the better. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Alex to close us out. And thank you again, Lory and Anne, for being so open and candid and sharing your experiences.
Thanks, Lory. Thanks, both Lorys.
Thank you. Thank you all.
It really has been an incredible conversation. Thank you all for adding your perspective on this topic. I think just to end things off, a reminder to join us next Thursday on April 29th for our first workshop in the Women Helping Women series. It's Negotiating Your Worth, hosted by Bhavna Smith, who's the founder of Until There Are Nine. And she'll be talking to us about why women don't ask for what we want or what we're worth, and what we can do to negotiate our worth when we next find ourselves at the table. But in the meantime, please follow Women in Tech on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you're not already registered for our platform, it's really easy to sign up, and you'll get all of the event details for our upcoming events, as well as some resources that we share as well. With that, I'm just going to thank you all one more time, and I hope to see you at the next event. Thank you all so much.